I had this client, let's call him John.
Yeah.
He was convinced that the charges had to be thrown out because police hadn't read him his Miranda rights. And he kept saying things like, they haven't read my rights. They didn't say it like they do in the movies. I'm pleading the fifth. That language comes straight from American television. In his mind, lawyers and prosecutors are meant to be like gladiators, locked in Mortal Kombat in some kind of Roman Colosseum.
Yeah. I'm Andrew Rule. This is Life and Crimes. Today we have another guest. We've had a few guests lately, and today it is Sydney-based criminal lawyer. He's also other sorts of lawyer, but we're talking to him about crime. His name is Tony Taouk. He was born in Melbourne and started out here as a youngster and moved to Sydney. So he has a foot planted firmly in each of those great cities and always takes an interest in what's happening on both sides of the Murray. Welcome to Life and Crimes, Tony.
Thank you for having me, Andrew.
Now, you have been in touch with me over the journey for probably a couple of years, just mentioning certain things and, pointing out certain things. And clearly you take a great interest in what happens around the law courts where you work. And you have pointed out to me, accurately, that a lot of people out in the world who don't go to court much or have much to do with courts have an unrealistic idea of what happens there, mainly based on the fact that they watch American television and, Hollywood movies. And they don't really understand what it's like to be involved in criminal proceedings in Australia, in Sydney, in Melbourne, or anywhere else in Australia. Is that a fair summary of your view?
Absolutely. What's always fascinated me, Andrew, is the gap between how people think the law works and how it actually works.
Yeah.
A lot of clients come in with their expectations shaped by American movies and TV shows.
Yeah.
They expect drama, they expect big moments, they expect these big moral crusades.
Yeah.
Now, I have to admit, I was one of those people too. Before I'd ever seen the inside of a courtroom, I'd absorbed the Hollywood version of law.
Yeah.
As a law student,
we
have to go watch real trials down in the Downing Centre or whatever.
Yeah.
I remember feeling genuinely surprised and a little disappointed by how ordinary and procedural it all was.
Did accounting start to look more interesting after 3 hours in the Downing Centre?
Absolutely. And I remember it was a very bland, it was a fight in a pub or something, and the cross-examination was very ordinary.
Yeah. And
the lawyers were very unremarkable, uncharismatic.
Yeah.
And I was just so disappointed.
Right.
And after 20 years in the law, I've been a lawyer since 2005, I've realized that a huge part of the job isn't just legal skill, it's actually helping people unlearn what Hollywood and television has taught them.
I see. So I take it you have had clients, not career criminals. These are just young lunatics or whatever that have got into a bit of trouble because they've done a stupid thing in a car or in a pub or whatever, or stolen something. And they've called you because you're an all-rounder. You can handle crime and all sorts of things. And they turn up at court and you've told them to wear, Dad's white shirt and a tie and all the rest of it. And what happens next? What goes on when they see what actually happens there?
Well, they expect theatre and grandeur, and what they see is a dry process. I had this one client, I'll call him Bill.
Yeah.
He turned up to court with a suit and tie. I think it was probably the first time he'd ever worn one.
Yeah.
Probably bought it from Lowe's, for all I know.
Yeah.
He was nervous, but he was clearly enjoying what he thought was a moment of notoriety.
Yeah.
There was this quiet pride about him,
like
a tough guy on trial, finally getting his day in court.
Oh, yeah.
He was young and you could tell he was new to the whole system.
Yep.
But in his mind, this was his big day. And he half convinced himself he was some kind of a big shot criminal, like the guys you see doing that perp walk in Chicago and New York.
Yeah.
Now, when he walked into court, he was expecting like a grand courtroom with wood paneling like he sees in the movies.
Yeah.
A sense of theatre. Instead, he saw a boring, plain room, no jury, no drama, no dramatic speech, just a bench, a simple bar table, and some lawyers shuffling through papers. And when he realised what it actually was, he actually looked genuinely deflated. He was almost offended, and he really felt insulted, and he actually told me about it. He expressed that to me. Closer to home, a similar thing happened to my nephew. He was in high school, my nephew Christian, He was in high school, and he told me that he was thinking about becoming a lawyer after watching a few TV shows, probably Suits or something like that.
Yeah.
And he said, "Can I do work experience with you?" And I said, "Absolutely." And I happened to be going to Penrith Local Court, which is in the western suburbs here in Sydney. And what he saw was the unfiltered reality of a busy local court in the western suburbs. You had prostitutes, haggard-looking drug addicts, petty thieves, people barely holding their lives together, all lined up to register their appearances.
Yeah.
Nothing like television at all. Certainly nothing like Suits. Well, he's actually studying commerce now.
Oh, that's gorgeous. That is wonderful. I don't want to compete with stories, and you're here to tell us your stories, but I'm compelled to mention that at one time, one of my children, who did end up being a lawyer, but when he was young and just starting out his law degree, he was asked by a law firm where he was doing a little bit of work experience to go to a northern town. It could have been Swan Hill, it might have been Mildura, somewhere up there. And they said, "Have you got a suit and tie?" "Yeah." "Can you clean your shoes?" "Yeah." "Now, we want you to go up there, and you are there to sort of sit behind a Mr. So-and-so, an older gentleman with an Italian name." I think he was involved in might have been some sort of domestic dispute with his wife. And the lawyer said to him, "Now, don't tell any lies, but if he assumes that you are a bona fide qualified lawyer, if he assumes that, no need to volunteer that you're not." And so he goes up there and he sits through, 2 days of this stuff in wherever it was, Mildura or Swan Hill. And when he got back, he said, "Dad, I don't know that I want to do criminal law." He said that, "I think there's a lot of people who tell lies." Meaning, he didn't mean the lawyers, of course, Tony. He meant the clients. So I said, "You're probably right, son." And so he went into a different branch of law. And I think that sort of franks your nephew's story, doesn't it? Same thing.
Yeah. Christian studying commerce now. He has no interest at all. Experience.
Yes. So you do a lot of different lines of law. You're a one-stop shop at your place, aren't you, at your practice? You could do a will one day and a dispute the next, and then turn up and do a burglary on the third day.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, all sorts, general practice, various things.
A touch of the rumpoles, a rumpole of the western suburbs.
Yeah, as opposed to rumpole of the Bailey.
Yes.
That's what you're referring to, isn't
Yes,
it?
Yes, indeed. Now, I know this is not, that series Rake where people turn up in court because they're having unnatural relations with a Alsatian dog or something. But what are some of the more unusual cases that you've been involved in, either in defence or on the other side of it?
Well, I had this client, it was an assault charge, and we were at a hearing, and I'll call this guy Mike. So I was in front of the judge, and I was at the bar table, and a cross-examination was taking place. The prosecutor was cross-examining a witness.
Yep.
And I said, "I object." That's what we say in Australia.
Yeah.
And he nudged me from behind and interrupted me, and he said, "You're saying it wrong. You should be saying objection." Because he'd been watching so many movies. He didn't realize that our legal system comes from the British tradition, not the American one.
Yep.
The language, the procedure, even the courtroom culture are completely different.
Yep.
But American pop culture is so dominant that people assume that the US version is the default.
Yep.
I understand the confusion. I actually made exactly the same mistake myself as a law student during a mock trial.
Yep.
I said objection, and I was immediately corrected by the presiding judge at the mock trial.
Yes.
You see that influence everywhere. People talk about pleading the fifth. I've heard of people even instinctively dialing 911 instead of 000. Now, that sounds trivial, but it just shows how deeply television and movies script or how the law is supposed to sound or behave.
That could cost someone's life, that mistake.
Absolutely. Yes.
It just goes to show how marinated we are in Americanisms, American culture.
Exactly.
Especially in the big cities like Sydney and Melbourne.
Yes,
In Oyen and Burke, it's not so bad, but in the big cities, we're very much marinated in American culture. Now, some of the other examples, what are some of the more unusual clients you've had, and what have they got up to, and how was it representing them?
Those Miranda rights have caused me quite a headache over the years.
Miranda rights.
Yes.
Now, that is the phrase used in America, is it not, about reading a perpetrator, the perp, his or her rights. And what do we call them here?
Just the right to silence. There's no absolute right ingrained in a constitution like it is in the US.
Yep.
Like I had this client, let's call him John.
Yep.
He was convinced that the charges had to be thrown out because police hadn't read him his Miranda rights. And he kept saying things like, they haven't read my rights. They didn't say it like they do in the movies. I'm pleading the fifth. That language comes straight from American television. Now, what I had to explain to him was very difficult is that Australia, it does have a right to silence, but it's not the American version that people expect. It's not constitutional. It's not absolute.
Yep.
And there's no magic script that makes the case disappear. Miranda rights come from a US Supreme Court case. I think it was Miranda versus Arizona.
Yeah.
Also, we don't have an equivalent Bill of Rights here, so you can't plead the Fifth Amendment. So the whole idea does not translate in Australia. And in some parts of the system, as you're aware, Andrew, like certain crime commissions, there's no right to silence at all, and people are shocked by that. I had another client, let's call him Chris. I deliberately have avoided attending the police station in person.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
Here in New South Wales, and I assume in Victoria it's the same, if police are investigating a serious offence and a lawyer is physically present, they can give you what's called a special caution, which can be later used against you if you stay silent. When I stayed away, he felt completely betrayed, but I explained this to him. But in his head, he expected me to walk into the station in a suit, slam a Samsonite briefcase on the table and shut down the interview like in the movies. To him, not appearing at the police station looked weak, but in reality, it was the best thing I could do and the most protective thing I could do.
Yes, because just for the sake of our listeners who need to understand what it is, if an offender or an accused is at a police station, and we're talking in Australia, and their lawyer turns up to help them survive the interview or whatever, that means they have had a level of protection. They've got a lawyer there. And because of that level of protection, the law assumes that they don't need the same level or the same right to silence that they would be entitled to if the lawyer wasn't there. So a conscientious lawyer like you, Tony, knows it's better to stay away because then the client has the sort of an absolute right to silence or closer to an absolute right to silence than if you were actually there holding their hand. Is that one way to put it?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right, yes.
What else have you noticed in your 20-odd years around the criminal courts?
Well, the truth in law tends to be filtered by the whole process, and it's not theatrical like in the movies.
I bet it is.
When it comes to admissibility especially.
Yeah.
Yes, it's very filtered. I'll give you an example. I had a client, let's call him Sam. This was, I believe it was a domestic violence case, and he was adamant that he wanted to put all these rumours and all this personal gossip that he'd heard about the complainant before the court. And he kept saying, but everyone knows it's true, just say it in court. And he just couldn't understand and grasp why. Courts don't hear everything people believe to be true. They only hear evidence that survives strict rules about relevance, fairness, admissibility. Something can be completely true, but completely irrelevant in court. And this is where the movies and television do the real damage.
Yeah.
Shows like Judge Judy and Better Call Saul, they create the impression that it's a place where anyone can just air their grievances, expose character flaws, and win by clever confrontation. In reality, most of the material would never get past the first objection.
Right.
Often, court has little to do with the truth, as people understand it, has everything to do with what can be proved, what's admissible, and what the rules allow to be heard. Trying to explain that distinction to someone who has learned the law from television can be an absolute nightmare.
So the first barrier, of course, is admissibility, because if it's not admissible, it's not there.
Yep.
The second one is basically provability. Can it be proven using, the acceptable levels of evidence? Is that right?
That's right. And even then, there's a thing called probative versus prejudicial value, where if it's more prejudicial to the defendant than it assists the court in reaching the truth, it can be disregarded completely.
Give us an example,
Okay, Mick Gatto. Not many people know this, but not many people know that there was something in his car at the time of the shooting of Andrew Venyman.
Yes, there was.
But I believe the court excluded that
Yeah.
because it was more prejudicial than probative.
At some point, that fact that you're referring to did come out at some point. And
It did?
I now can't recall at what point that fact came out, but I've certainly seen it referred to and written since then about a body bag in the boot. And the fact that, of course, you're driving around with a body bag in the boot, allegedly, would suggest that you, A, had some use for a body bag, such as putting a body in it, or B, just thought it was a good prop, a scary thing to have, like a skull and crossbones, just something to scare people. Or C, you needed it because, you were going to pick up a slaughtered goat and bring it home for Easter, and you wanted to put it in the body bag so you wouldn't get blood all over your boot. It could be various explanations for having a body bag other than planning a murder. Would that be fair to
right.
Mick Gatto, Dominic Gatto?
Yes.
Yeah. He may well have wanted to bring home a goat.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, but I'm pretty sure they decided that it should be excluded because the jury would draw too many
adverse
conclusions from the presence of the body bag.
I'm sure you're right. And I suspect that I've just heard about it sort of after the event somehow. It did leak out somehow, but
I'm pretty sure it was excluded. I'm not sure, but I remember there was an argument about it.
It's a great example of the sort of thing that
yes.
Could happen. And indeed, the presence of certain implements or weapons or whatever, if you are a slaughterman or a butcher by trade. I can recall this, my own father many, many years ago, picking up a young fella very early in the morning, young tough, rough-looking bloke. Back in the days when most people did not have tattoos, this bloke had a few, and my father picked him up, and he looked a bit anxious and a bit sweaty, this bloke. And he was, in fact, as it turns out, he was anxious and sweaty because he was late for work. But he hops in the front with my father, and after a little while, they're driving along a very lonely stretch of highway at 7 a.m, and he reaches into his duffel bag and pulls out a big butcher's knife. And my father looked at him quizzically, thinking, this is not good. And then he pulled out a steel, a butcher's steel to sharpen it, and he starts to sharpen his knife. It turns out that he's a slaughterman and he's late for work at the abattoir that's 20 miles ahead. And he was just a legit fellow going about his business, late for work. His car had broken down or run out of fuel, and my father had picked him up. But, of course, if he were not a slaughterman going to work, the fact that he was carrying around a butcher's knife would be held against him, or possibly held against him, because you'd say, why are you carrying a butcher's knife if you are not indeed a butcher or a slaughterman? So context is everything, isn't it?
Exactly. So it's just a big balancing act.
Yeah.
Walking a tightrope in the court, deciding what can be admitted, what can't, and what should be excluded from being heard by the jury, what's prejudicial, what isn't. It's a big balancing act, but try explaining that to a client. It's an absolute nightmare.
Tony, you come from Melbourne. I think you might have grown up in the inner north, or what was in those days the slightly outer north back in the day. And you might even have grown up not far from a place that a friend of mine calls Little Chicago. Is that true?
Yeah.
Where was that?
I was born and raised in Melbourne. I lived in Preston first and later in Balwyn.
Yes.
Now, you mentioned Little Chicago, but living there as a kid, it did not feel like that at all. It was just working class and mostly families. Very ordinary, apart from the odd burglary in the neighbourhood.
Preston.
But one of my early memories of living in that area was being driven past Pentridge Prison. It looked like a medieval fortress. I remember being in awe of those large bluestone walls, and they were so intimidating. And I was genuinely horrified thinking about how many bad criminals must be behind those walls.
Yeah.
Of course, later on you realise it's just full of ordinary, flawed and often unremarkable people. My family moved to Sydney when I was 16. I've been here ever since. Right. I went straight into law school after high school, and I've been practicing law since 2005, so just over 20 years.
You left your primary school days behind you in Preston. You moved to Balwyn. Where did you go to school there?
I did primary school in Sacred Heart Primary School in Preston.
Mm-hmm.
Then I went to Marcelin College in Bulleen.
Oh, and of course, we all know who went to Marcelin College in Bulleen, don't we? Before he was expelled or left. Who was that?
Alphonse Gangitano.
That's the one. So the answer to every question in Melbourne of the last few decades goes all the way back to the Carlton crew and others in the underworld, the so-called sort of underbelly scenario. So Marcelin, we hear it and we go, Alphonse went there, and that's the way it is in Melbourne. Now, you're an affable, friendly, pleasant man. How do you go with some magistrates? Do you find some far more affable than others? Some pretty funny magistrates? Some are pretty strict, I imagine. Some are humorless. What's the range of behaviour that you see on the bench, or you have seen on the bench in your time in the law?
A completely mixed bag. Luck of the draw.
Really?
Lottery. I've had the most compassionate, nice, understanding magistrates.
Mm-hmm.
Like I had one where, my client was completely in the wrong and there was no way out. And I don't know, she just, maybe because she had children, she could relate to it. And she was just so understanding. And I gave him the worst case scenario and the result was just the complete opposite. I've had other occasions where I've appeared in front of magistrates who it's supposedly a straightforward case. The biggest frustration I have is when they interrupt you and they don't let you finish and they shut you down. I've had cases where counsel has gotten up and asked the judge to disqualify themselves on the grounds of bias. They usually don't, but it's like a grounds for appeal.
Yeah.
I had this really big confrontation with a judge years ago, me and counsel, where he refused. He was just kept cutting us short, kept interrupting us in the course of our cross-examination. Yeah. And it just turned into a big argument with the magistrate. So he was just really a real grumpy, angry man. He actually told me to stop looking at him because I was just observing him to see his reaction to the evidence. And he actually stopped and said, "Can you stop looking at me?"
You're joking.
So yes, absolutely.
In open court, that would not...
in open court.
It would appear to be a bit over the odds. As my mother says, a cat may look at a king. Anyone can look at anyone.
Yeah, he was miserable. And I've had others that were just great. And it's a mixed bag, like I said, and it's just luck of the draw.
Now, I know that you are a very honest operator and wouldn't do anything wrong or anything shifty, but I have heard of scallywag lawyers going judge shopping or magistrate shopping and saying, "Oh, no, we don't want to go before old, Mr. Von Einem. We want to go before the mushy lady that feels sorry for people."
Absolutely.
And you get, is there a little bit of that?
Oh, absolutely. When you've got a really horrible judge, it's always nice to have a bit of an adjournment.
Oh, I see. You could.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
But if you can get that adjournment, if you have the grounds for an adjournment, of course you take it.
Take it.
I mean, you can't mislead the course. You have to be honest.
Of course you do. Of course you do. You have to be honest. I have heard of cases in Sydney where some older crooks, really good old-time crooks that had done pretty big drug imports in their day and, old-time underworld identities. And they'd made a bit of a comeback in their late 60s and early 70s, and they'd imported a big load of stuff. I think this was going to be their retirement package, this one. Anyway, wouldn't believe it. They get sprung, and it's a very big deal. And on the evidence, you'd think they'd be facing very long sentences that might see most of them out, that they'd die inside. Anyway, their defence counsel, whose name I have somewhere, said, "Oh, no, we'll wait until we get such and such a judge." And I know the name of that person too, if I've got it somewhere. And this defence counsel worked out ways to delay things until this certain judge came up. And that judge took a very tolerant view of these old offenders. It was wonderful, really, because he was able to see that they were, old enough to be grandparents, and that he took the view put by the defence that they were just patsies, these old blokes. They were just shambling old patsies and, one foot in the grave, and that really some cunning, thrusting, ruthless criminals had orchestrated this drug importation and had just sent poor old grandpa and his mates down to the warehouse to pick it up. And that was what the defence counsel put to this judge. And Tony, do you know what happened? The judge appeared to believe it. And the judge said, "Oh, is that right? Well, thank you, Mr. Defence Counsel." And he gave those old reptiles, who were thoroughgoing villains, who were behind the whole thing, gave them very light sentences. They already had some time served. They'd been held inside for a year or two. And in the end, I think they were all out of jail in another 18 months. It was a great result for them. They didn't get the big money from the drug import, but neither did they get a big sentence. A little bit of judge shopping. Now, do you think that might go on in some jurisdictions?
Well, look, I'm sure there's corruption everywhere. I haven't personally seen it.
No.
I've never seen corruption in the legal system.
Right.
But I've had clients and movie fans, particularly from countries with fragile legal systems, who assume that the Australian system must be corruptible.
Yes.
For instance, I had a client, let's call him Rick. He had this case. I think it was a fraud case.
Yeah.
Who quietly asked me if I would speak to someone to make the problem go away. And when I explained that there was no one to speak to and that judges couldn't be brought in Australia and prosecutors couldn't be leaned on, he genuinely thought that I was being naive and evasive. In his mind, a lawyer's role was closer to someone like Roy Cohn.
To be a fixer and a middleman.
Influence, pressure, back channels, you control the outcomes. So shows like Better Call Saul amplify this idea by portraying powerful lawyers as people who win cases through leverage and intimidation rather than process the law. But it's very unreal. I haven't seen that in Australia.
Right.
You hear about it, but I haven't personally come across that at all.
Oh, that's interesting. That's reassuring, actually, because you do hear a few little mumblings about certain things happening in certain places. And not only in Sydney, Tony. I know there's some colourful old magistrates down here at one time, and I have to say they were funny people. They were, good company, some of them. Most of them no longer with us, of course. They've gone to the great magistrates' court in the sky. But I think some of them weren't beyond seeing the other side of a case, providing somebody greased their palm. Oh, I can think of one. I think he might have got a share in a racehorse. I think a racehorse trainer was in a bit of trouble, and it would be just speeding in 0.05 or something. But this trainer did not lose his licence because he needed it to drive to the races and tow his horse float. And next thing, this magistrate, within a matter of months, had a horse racing with that trainer with a large share. He might have had a half share in the horse, which was terrific, really. They'd sort of bonded in court, and the magistrate ended up racing a horse with the trainer who had not lost his licence and not been fined much at all. So that was a great result. And I don't know that the magistrate was required to pay too many, feed bills. I think maybe he was being shouted the horse's board and lodging, but I'm sure those sort of low-level things have always gone on a little bit, but not in your hearing, Tony.
No, but doesn't stop people from being suspicious and conspiratorial.
True.
I'll give you another example. Yeah. I had this client called, let's call him Tom. He became very upset after the matter didn't go his way.
Yeah.
Earlier in the day, he'd seen me chatting quite amicably with the prosecutor outside the courtroom.
Yeah.
Nothing secretive, just small talk while we were waiting out for our matters to be called.
As one does. You're a professional. You see those people most weeks.
Yeah, exactly. Because you see them all the time. You get to know them on a personal level, but it doesn't interfere with your job.
No.
It doesn't. You stay professional,
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, once the outcome became clear, that moment where I was talking to the prosecutor earlier took on a whole new meaning for him. He pulled me aside and accused me of conspiring with the prosecutor against him.
Yeah.
Now, in his mind, lawyers and prosecutors are meant to be like gladiators locked in Mortal Kombat in some kind of Roman Colosseum.
Yeah.
One side wins,
Wonderful.
the other side's defeated.
Yeah.
There's no interaction outside the fight.
Yeah.
It took time to explain that the legal system is adversarial, but it's not personal. Lawyers can argue fiercely in court and still behave professionally outside it.
Yes.
Courtesy is not corruption. It's just how the system functions.
Yes.
Now, Hollywood teaches people that lawyers must hate each other, glare across the courtroom, and treat every case like a personal vendetta. In reality, the system relies on working relationships, trust, and professionalism.
Ah, good point. I suspect, and you could guide me here, I suspect that some specialist criminal lawyers, and by this I mean the sort of the rougher, tougher end of the business who do nothing else. I suspect some of them showboat for their clients. I suspect they put on a bit of an act and, throw haymakers in court. When I say haymakers, verbally, in court, that are really just fairly fake and that they're really pulling their punches. But they're doing a bit of frothing at the mouth and a bit of thumping of the table and a bit of loud voices, all for the benefit of their client who's paying them rather a lot of money when in fact the result is inevitable that the client is going to go down anyway. So they put on a bit of an act.
Yes.
Do you think that's a thing?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. They have to make it look like they're, putting on a big fight.
Yeah. A bit sort of like tent boxes, they wind up and throw a big punch and carry on and insult the other fella. The late Andrew Fraser down here, criminal lawyer that we interviewed at some length on this very podcast, he, I think, was a bit inclined to do that when he was representing the bad boys. They wanted to get a bit of bang for their buck, so he'd turn it on for them a bit. Just so they...
But he went a bit too far.
He did go... He certainly did. I think even he would have admitted he might have gone a bit far. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. You're right there.
Yeah.
He's still with us, but Chris Murphy was a fairly entertaining courtroom performer, wasn't he?
Oh, absolutely. I haven't heard of him much lately. I think he's receded into the shadows lately. He's just, he must be retired.
He's getting quite old and frail, I think. But in his pomp, 30 odd years ago, he was quite something to see. He was
the Silver Fox, they used to call him.
The Silver Fox, quite theatrical.
Yes.
And probably pretty good at it. But there was a lot of theatre and a lot of street smarts in what he did. And I often think that series Rake, although it owed a lot to what's his name?
Charles Water Street.
Charles Water Street. Although it probably quite a lot of it had a bit to do with him, I suspect that Murphy and some others were also at the back of the mind of those who wrote the scripts.
Yeah, a lot of lawyers are coming out to claim that it was based on them.
Yeah, of course.
Foremost, Charles Water Street. Yeah.
Yes, they.
Yes.
In fact, I think the most excellent actor, Richard Roxburgh, who's a very pleasant and jovial man, I think he at some point got very exasperated with an interviewer and said, "Do not bring up Charles Water Street with me again." It's not all about him. And I mean, some of those cases were lifted directly from real cases, and some I think are probably, more or less figments of the scriptwriter's imagination.
Yeah, Richard Roxburgh is really good.
Very good at it, is he not?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Tony, you're a bit of a student of the theatre of court. You've watched others at work and seen them do some of their best work. What's the saddest thing you've seen in a court?
The saddest thing I've seen in the court was when someone delivered something and it was installed on a property.
Yeah.
And the recipient forgot to sign the delivery docket.
Right.
And in this instance, it was roof tiles. They were installed and you could see them.
Yeah.
But it just, only because that delivery docket was not signed, he could not get paid for it. And I found that really sad.
Oh, that's outrageous. That is sad. That would make me sad if I was this is where the law can be an ass in some ways.
That's right. So on a technicality, common sense, intuition tells you that the items were delivered. But
is there any room there, any room for manoeuvre for a magistrate or a judge to say, now look, ladies and gentlemen, clearly this is what's happened, this is an oversight. It would be ridiculous for this not to be resolved amicably and justly by person A paying person B. Can the bench do that sort of thing?
Yeah, they can. It happens.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It would happen. But ultimately, it would fly in the face of the evidence.
Right.
Because, why was the delivery docket not signed? I mean, that's a critical piece of evidence.
Why was it not signed?
The roof tiles are just an oversight.
Just an oversight?
But the tiles were installed on the house.
And who sort of put their hand up and objected and said, I didn't sign the delivery docket? Or who objected and why?
Of the tiles. The recipient of the tiles.
And he said, I'm not going to pay because even though I've used the tiles, but then here's the thing, could not the deliverer of the tiles turn up with a large ladder and start throwing all the tiles off the roof?
That would be a criminal offence.
Would it? Oh, why? Why is that?
Intentionally and recklessly causing damage to property.
No. He'd be removing the tiles that the other fella hadn't properly received.
Well, he can't prove they're his tiles. It's conversion.
Oh, I see. Oh, the law.
Yeah.
Tony, it's true. The law can be an ass. It's not always. Sometimes it's only a donkey, and sometimes it's a Shetland pony, and sometimes it's a shaggy dog.
Thank you for having me, Andrew.
Thanks for listening. Life and Crimes is a Sunday Herald Sun production for True Crime Australia. Our producer is Jonty Burton. For my columns, features and more, go to heraldsun.com.au/Andrew Rule, one word. For advertising inquiries, go to newspodcastssold@news.com.au. That is all one word, newspodcastssold. And if you want further information about this episode, links are in the description.